Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Ollie. Welcome to the next tutorial in this series of Java for Beginners. In this tutorial, we're finally going to be learning how we can get input from the user, and once you know how to do this, then we can start making much more interactive applications. So what we're first of all going to be doing is we're going to be making an import. If you remember, imports are where you simply reference the location and name of a class that's built into Java, and it just means that it's going to let us use it within our class. So the import we're going to make is something called the scanner, and the scanner is basically the object we're going to be using to scan for input from the user, and then we're going to be taking the input and then we can do stuff with it. So what we're going to be importing is java.util.scanner. And now that we've imported this, we can make an object of it down here. So we're going to make a scanner object, and we're simply going to call it in for input, and it's going to be equal to a new scanner, like so. And then this scanner takes a parameter of something called an input stream, and Java already has an input stream built in for us. Much like we write system.out, this time we're going to write system.in. And we're creating a new scanner object, and the thing that the scanner is going to be scanning for is the system input, and that's basically the input which we type into this console down here. So now that we've made our scanner called in, let's just show you very basically how it works. We're going to be saying, let's for example say system.out.println, and we'll say what is your name? And then we're going to set a string, we're going to make a string variable called name, and we'll set it equal to in dot next line rather. And what this in dot next line is, it's basically going to wait until the user types in a line of text, and when they hit enter, that's going to become equal to this next line method, and it's going to return it and store in the name variable. So then we can, below this system.out.println, we could say your name is, and then concatenate on the name. So now if I drag the input up and run this, you can see it says what is your name, and it's just waiting for us to input something. So I'm going to write Ollie and hit enter, and you see it says your name is Ollie. You can obviously work with any other thing you'll type in. So now that we know how to do that, I'm going to show you some of the other methods we can use with our scanner. So if we say, after we say what is your name, we're going to make another print line, system.out.println, and we'll say, we'll remove this one actually, we'll say how old are you, and then we're going to set an integer called age equal to, and now instead of saying in.nextLine, we actually need to use a new method called nextIn, and you can see it right there, next integer, and that records the next integer that you type in. So if you type in a string, then it's not going to do anything. It's going to wait for you to type in an integer, and then once an integer has been received, then it's going to store that in age. So we can now print out this print line. Your name is plus the name, and you are age years old. So you can see now if I hit run, you can see how it works differently with the in.nextLine and the in.nextIn. I'll show you first of all. Obviously if you type numbers here, it will just be read in as a string, so this in.nextLine will always read whatever you type in. So I'll put Ollie as the name. How old are you? It's waiting for an integer, so if we actually type in a string and hit enter, it is going to give us this error, which is this input mismatch error. Oops. And it's basically because we typed in something that wasn't a string. So what we can actually use is our try and catch, which we learned in the last tutorial. So we know that the user may not type in an integer, they may type a string by accident, and then in which case we get that error. So what we're going to do, we're going to cleverly place this inside of a while loop, which means that until the user types in a correct number, until the user types in an integer, it's going to keep looping around and ask you the same question. So let's make this integer called age, but we won't declare it yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to say while, we'll make a new boolean up here actually, and then we're going to just call it got it, and that will be equal to false. Whilst not got it, so whilst we haven't got the integer from the whilst we haven't received a valid integer for this age variable, we're going to say, we're going to try to make the age equal to in.nextInt, but obviously that's going to throw an error if the user types in anything other than an integer. So we're actually going to catch this exception here, and we can just name it exception, like I said, because that's the sort of main class for all exceptions. So if we catch an error, we can just call continue, and then that will go around. We don't really need this continue, but I'll just keep it there. So let me explain again what's going on. So we know that we know that when we're trying to get an integer from the user, they could type in a string instead of an integer, and as you just saw down here, you will get an input mismatch error. And what we've done here is we're going to make a while loop, and this is basically going to keep looping until we receive the next integer, and actually it's going to loop infinitely because we never change the value of this got it. So if we get the next integer on the next line, if we reach this next line, it means that an exception wasn't thrown, so we can set got it equal to true. So what's going to happen, we've made an integer called age, and we're actually just going to initialize this to nothing to begin with, because otherwise we'll get an error down here because variable might not have been initialized. So we set the age initially equal to 0. We've made a boolean called got it, and it's basically stating whether or not we've received a valid integer. So whilst we haven't got it, basically, we're going to try and catch, we're going to try and set the age equal to in.nextInt, but if the user types in a string, an exception is going to be thrown, it's going to be passed into this catch statement, and we're just going to call continue, which continues back up to the top of the while loop. So we still haven't got it, so it's going to try and set age equal to nextInt again, and until they type in a valid integer, once they do type in a valid integer, it's going to set that equal to true, which is going to break out of the while loop. And what we're also going to do in the catch statement is just give a message to our user to show them why their input isn't being accepted. We're going to say that is not a valid number. Okay, so now that we've written all this out, we're going to hit run again, and we're going to see our program in action. So what is your name? Ollie. How old are you? If I type in, say, in words, if I type in my age in a string and we hit enter, and whoops, that didn't work. Let me just see what went wrong. Right, so what went wrong was that this input here, basically when we get this nextInt here, it's going to grab the integer that they type in, but for some reason when they made this scanner object, they didn't decide to sort of move to reset this input when we get it. So in other words, when we get this in.nextInt, the reason that it was constantly looping that is not a valid number is because this next int is set equal to that first one that you type in, and once you hit enter, that's always going to be what nextInt is. So what we actually need to do is we sort of need to move the scanner past that one that we just typed in. So we need to basically say like, okay, you've read that integer there, now move on to the next integer. That's basically all we need to say. And we do this by, when an exception is caught, it means that we need to grab another integer, so we need to shift the scanner's input along. So after we say this is not a valid number, we're going to say in.next. And that basically means that we grab the next integer we type in, and this is still equal to that integer we typed in. It's not going to move along the input at all, which is why it was infinitely looping. So if the exception is caught, it means we do need to move to another line. So we simply say in.next, and it moves past that integer that we originally typed in, and it's going to allow us to enter the new one. So I'm going to hit run again and show you how this works. What is your name, Ollie? How do you? So if I type in something that's not valid, you can see it says that's not a valid number, and it's going to keep doing that because it's in a while loop. It's just going to keep on doing that until, got to drag up some more, until we type in a valid number, and once it's a valid integer, you can see that the while loop breaks out and displays the thing that we typed successfully.